با سر همبندی حق بازی به چند وقتی انسان میتواند یک کاری را پیش ببرد، ولی این کار دائمی نمیتواند باشد. چنته هر کسی که تو خالی باشد بالاخره معلوم میشد.
Welcome to episode 46 of Chanteh Podcast. Tonight we are talking about reconciliation programs, where they come from, who is pushing them forward, and where are they actually heading. These programs are often treated as untouchable, but asking questions about public policies that impacting our society or province isn't disrespectful. It's completely necessary. Joining me today is Jim McMurty, candidate with the 1BC party. Jim, let's get into it. Shall we start with land acknowledgement?
I hope you don't, because what it means is that a lot of people in Canada are worried about losing their property titles. So it's a good joke, but it's not sad. A happy subject.
That's true. That's so true. Thanks for your time, Jim. You're very inspirational. I have a lot of respect to you. You're one of those critical thinkers, freedom fighters that I know. I know you from the time that you were running for PPC in the last federal election. So let's start with just introduce yourself. Tell me about the journey. You had a solid career, 40 years of experience. You had PhD in Indigenous history and Canadian history. Very successful career. What made you to speak up? Go back a little bit. Tell me about your story and then get to that point.
Well, you know what? In many ways, my story is your story. So I noticed in your introduction that you're concerned about how life was in Iran historically. Am I correct there? That the people have a very strong thirst for rights and freedoms. I can relate to the Iranian people. Many people like Shirin Ebadi are heroes of mine. I'm very proud to be with you. And I think that democracy is something, as my father, who was the Chief Justice of Ontario and politician and a CEO and involved in we call the Constitution, being brought back to Canada. We were in 1982. My father, was a very important Order of Canada recipient. And the one thing that he always said to me is that democracy really is a very thin veneer around, sort of like a boiling mass of tyranny and oppression and violence, and don't ever take it for granted. We need to fight, as strong, as hard as we can for the fundamental core values and rights of everybody, and not just in Canada, around the world. So I'm just as offended by tyrannies outside my country as I am by those within. And I never imagined growing up, and if I could say that I'm an older fellow at 66, that the Canada that I see today isn't the one that I remember. I can't believe that I was walked out of class as a senior teacher who was a principal and a college lecturer, that I was walked out of class by telling kids the truth. But what they're doing in schools right now, there's this lunatic leftist woke program where people think that the way to better our society is to pretend that there's everything wrong with it and that we need to draw influences from everywhere else. So we need to destroy Enlightenment values, Western institutions, even replace colonialism, immigration, completely break apart all the things that this country has built up. A country that's a beacon to Iranians, to Zimbabweans, to Poles, to Ukrainians, to Syrians, people around the world who want a place where they know that they have these rights entrenched. The government can't ever take them away. So what the heck has happened when in the last 10 or so years, our schools, our universities have been captured by these woke cultists, these new religious high priests who think in order to make themselves look better, that they need to discredit everyone and everything about our country. And so they were starting to lie about Canada and saying that Indigenous people were subject to a genocide. All parliamentarians voted saying that in 2022. And so it's an extraordinary thing because Canada has done more for its Indigenous people than any country in the world. So as Orwell talked about, war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is truth. It's upside down. We know that diversity isn't diversity, that inclusion isn't inclusion. We know that these mad people, maybe many of them are globalists, I don't know what you want to call them, but these utterly psychopathic and nihilistic people on the extreme left who want to, again, deconstruct, to decolonize, to destroy what my ancestors worked hard to build up. I mean, it's so wrong. And my father, who was, again, an establishment figure, he felt the same way up until his death just under 2 years ago. He couldn't believe that we are taking down statues of our most important historical figures, like our first Prime Minister, Sir John A. Macdonald, that we were burning churches and the hundreds of churches being vandalized or burned to the ground, all over a false story or narrative about white Canadians, European origin, being genocidal and treating minority groups terribly. There's no country in the world that's done more for Black people than Canada. We had in 1793, we had an act for the abolition of slavery. We were the Underground Railway, the escape route for American slaves. And yet we get prime ministers like the guy now, Carney, and then Trudeau before him, that are coming in and they're making it seem so they can pretend that they're better than everybody else. Oh no, everything about Canada was terrible in the past, but look at us. We're going to make it all better by taking away the rights of white European Canadians, particularly male, heterosexual, conservative types, and everybody's going to be equal. And that we saw how that worked in Russia, where they killed all the wealthy, successful farmers and then just turned it over to the less successful people. And of course, all you had was decades of violence.
That's true. But I want to take one step back. I want to look at it from higher level. So what's the true agenda by destroying the identity of Canada? So what they are doing actually is trying to destroy what Canada used to be. So first of all, all these first settlers, they were these horrible monsters that they were able to kill all those children, rape them. They committed genocide. That's a big word. It's got a lot of legal implications. Where did the word genocide came from?
Well, genocide, but this is what they're doing with language. This is, again, very Orwellian, is they're taking words and they're changing their meaning. They're opposite to what they really mean. The genocide is the killing of people. By putting these kids in schools freely, they were educating them. They were giving them a leg up and teaching them English and agricultural skills and giving them generally the ability to survive in a modern world. The world that they were living in was perishing. They were not surviving. They were starving to death. They were succumbing to diseases from the old continent. Without the Canadian government, without these schools, without vaccination programs, food relief, they would have disappeared. To answer your question, I think what this is really all about is, sadly, nothing more than people trying to further their own interests. Mm-hmm. None of what they are saying is true, and I think a majority of people around the world know that our governments got into power and they're saying and doing things that don't make any sense. For Europe, for example, to be overrun with so many immigrants who hate Western values. That makes no sense. We're seeing that in Canada. So I just like to harp on the idea here that Orwell also said, those who control the present control the past, and those who control the past control the future. If you go back and you change the stories of the past, if you tell Black people and Indigenous people and women and Asians and everybody else that white Europeans were terrible with them, then they're going to hate. This is Charles Manson, that terrible psychopathic Californian who talked about helter skelter. By going around with his family of murderers, he was trying to create a race war between Blacks and whites in Los Angeles in the 60s.
Yeah.
And so the idea, out of that chaos, he would rise up. I think that's really what's happening here. I don't believe if you give all of Canada back to Indigenous people, the Indigenous people are going to end up with the land and the power after a short while. I think really this is they're creating a race war. And I think there are people, bigger money interests are going to come in, like the Chinese and maybe people sitting and on top of thrones in Europe, whoever. They're going to come in, they're going to buy out the Indigenous people. There's where I live in southern British Columbia, south of Vancouver, a place called Tsawwassen. They gave back a ton of land right where I live, agricultural land, bird flyover land that nobody could ever build on. They gave it to a native band called the Tsawwassen. The Tsawwassen paved it all over. So no more bird flyover, no more agricultural land. It was the best agricultural land in Western Canada. And that's right, because it's all that, the sediment that came down, the alluvial, flow that came down from the mountains, and flat and rich. Well, they gave it over to them and they just built it up, just completely. Every inch of it is being paved over, and then they sold it to the Chinese. There's a huge mall, it's Chinese owned. Now there's American interest, there's a big factory, there's Amazon, there's no big American company that hasn't bought out a part of this reserve. So again, this isn't about Indigenous people. This isn't really about European people mistreating anyone in the past. This is simply a ploy to rob people of their fundamental rights. And you can see the benefit from that. In medieval times, you had the landowning class. You had people who divvied up the land, particularly in England. You had the 5 levels of nobility: the earls, the barons, the marquises, people know this stuff, and the dukes at the top, and then with the royal family, and they controlled, and people underneath them who didn't have basic rights. They didn't own the land. They had to work just to live on the land of their lord, and they even had practices where the lord could come in and sleep with a bride on her wedding night. I mean, ordinary people had no rights. And the only thing that saved medieval people was the creation of cities, because they could escape to cities and they became zones where they're no longer controlled by these overlords. I mean, this is what people are envisioning. If you undo society, if you what they want to do, create some sort of devolution where you go back in time and again say, well, we're going to live like the Indigenous people who were constantly killing each other and not knowing whether they're going to have enough food to get through winter. Again, that's what they say, but really what they mean is more money and power and influence for the people at the top of the society. And Orwell talked about that as well. He said, this big brother, the party in Airstrip 1, and anyhow, in the society that had taken over from England, it was about 15% that lived very well, and they didn't even care about the great masses. They weren't informed. They were just slavishly working, and they had their pleasures, but they were completely exploited. This is what they're wanting to do to us. They're wanting us to that one beautiful line. you will own nothing and you will be happy.
Yeah, absolutely. Jim, it really excites me to speak with you. And then you are a critical thinker, and I just want to ask you, where is this bravery coming from? Well, like, why didn't you play along and just follow whatever is going on, just like these people? What distinguish you from the rest of these people?
Well, I think the most heroic people for me today are probably in places like Ukraine. But for much of my adult life, it's been the young men and women who have sacrificed themselves, fighting against the Shah and then fighting against Ayatollah and fighting against this monstrous regime in Iran. I think there are so many people around the world who are infinitely braver than I am. Having said that, I have been physically assaulted. I've got death threats. I've walked onto university. I've been surrounded by mobs. A week ago, I had to have the police put me in a police cruiser to protect me. But the one thing that all these people know about me is I'm not going to turn my back. I am going to continue to do the one thing that I think I have an opportunity. I never would have chosen to be fired. But I was chosen, I was chosen in this sense that I know that I have the most powerful drug of all, coursing through my veins.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to call it truth, a truth serum that I studied long enough. I even studied under the father of our Prime Minister, Mark Carney, who is the leading expert on what you should call Indian education policy in residential schools and day schools and so forth. I know that there was never a child that was missing or murdered or disappeared or mistreated. There might have been some cases of abuse that were dealt with, but my goodness, almost every teacher in any school around the world, today and back in time, devoted him or herself to helping young people. And school is not an environment you can go around and do bad things to kids, because people notice. In these residential schools, I know you have some people watching from other countries, but what they did for indigenous people, for native people, we used to call our Indian people, when Columbus came over in 1492 and thought he was in India. What's fascinating is these people for so long were people who were they had the toughest life, and all we've ever tried to do is to come over here and make it better for them. And people who were really important were teachers. And 400 years ago, there were Jesuits and Ursuline nuns who were teaching reading and writing and hygiene and Christianity, whether that was right or wrong, but they were teaching kids. And then you go 100 years ago, 50 years ago, they were still doing that. But you couldn't put every indigenous kid into a city, into a regular school. They lived, many of them, in small groupings of 50 people or 100 people. They're on trap lines. They're following the caribou. They lived in isolated areas. So for some of them, up to about a third at one point, they were taken out of, in many cases, taken out of their home community and put into what they call boarding school or residential school. But those schools, like the one in Kamloops, where the whole world was told that 215 kids were murdered and were buried in a mass grave, the cooks and the cleaners and the dormitory supervisors and the plumbers and the people who worked in these schools were largely indigenous. They had indigenous or native teachers. Kamloops, they had 3 indigenous teachers and they had an indigenous principal. So it's not that I'm brave. It's that I know what I am saying is right. And educationally as well, it's not just about indigenous issues. You don't put kids into race brackets or buckets based on things they can't deal with. We're doing that in schools and universities. We're giving people jobs based on, well, we've got too many white males, therefore we need to hire other people. We don't have enough transsexuals who are doctors, therefore. I mean, you don't do that, particularly to kids. You don't inquire into their sexuality and ask them what their pronouns are, or maybe if they're in the wrong body, and convert them into a deviant sexual lifestyle. You don't take away the good literature that we've enjoyed for generations. You don't lie to them about their country. You don't do daily land acknowledgements, which you're very funny about. Clipping, you mean, you don't do these things. You just let kids be kids, and you let them form their own opinions. You provide them with facts. You give them the thinking skills that are going to help them in life and allow them to come to their own conclusions. There's nothing that I represent. Now, Asen, you're probably a lot smarter than I am. So tell me if I'm wrong on this, but I don't think you're going to say that. There's nothing that I am standing for that's wrong. It's the other side. It's all the people that are running institutions in Canada and elsewhere in the Western world. They're the ones that are wrong. They are so wrong to lie about our history, to lie about Europeans, to lie about Christians, to lie about Enlightenment values, to think that you can destroy what we've created and easily replace it with something better. All you're going to do is take us back to the Dark Ages.
Okay. But one question these people who are opposing you, they might have, is that, so why Indigenous people, they are not having, although they are getting a lot of perks and benefits, why don't they have like a good standard of living as the rest of Canada, the first settlers? So that's why they keep the blame on white people. Say, oh, see, there's a lot of addiction going on. There's a lot of problem they have. Like if you go to Indigenous neighborhood, you can definitely see the difference of their standard of living with respect to the rest of Canada. So where is this coming from? How we can justify that?
Yeah, well, but it's interesting you say that, because if you go back to Western Canada and you go back just 200 years, just over 200 years,
right?
They were living without the wheel, without metal, without literacy, numeracy. They didn't have anything. They didn't have anything at all in the way of technology outside of bones and wood tools and dugout canoes. I mean, they were digging in the ground with their hands for roots. Yeah, you can't say that you can't take people who 200 years ago were living in the Stone Age. And that's what I mean by the Stone Age. My ancestors were in the Stone Age, but it was longer ago. It was, it was in many ways, it was thousands and thousands of years ago. We know we've had literacy for as many as 4,000 or 5,000 years, and people could argue, 8,000 years or more. And so they didn't have that in some parts of the world. And the reasons for that, I'm not condemning or indicting any people, but they were not advanced. And then all of a sudden, people coming over who have superior skills, technology, social organization, and they clash. Mm-hmm. And obviously the group that is more advanced takes over, and then they build a modern democracy. But they at no time were indifferent or insensitive to the Indigenous people. Right from the beginning, starting in 1763, when the British defeated the French, they talked about all citizens being equal. French, English, Indigenous, everybody was to have equal rights. There's never been a time in Canadian history where anyone said, we want to have a country where people are not equal. That's just not Canada. And so that's people have tried, but you cannot take people, and you know that in Africa, we see that. You can't go to Africa and bring with you, all the accoutrements, all the commodities, all the practices, the manners, and so forth of 17th century British society, and simply say, okay, South Africa, or okay, Rhodesia, or whatever it was called back in time, be like us. it takes time. If you don't mind my saying something that I don't want to inflame anybody, but I'm going to say it anyway. And that is, I see that with the Muslim world. The Muslim world was more advanced in the Christian world than the Western European world, that so much of our knowledge comes from. Obviously, the first civilizations are all in the Muslim world today, Mesopotamia, and starting with the Assyrians and others. But something happened to the Muslim world to arrest its development. And even today, you can go into many countries and you can try and set up democratic parliamentary democracy, and it doesn't work. And I'm not saying it's anything to do intelligence.
Look, Afghanistan, the very recent.
Look at Afghanistan. They tried.
They tried, yeah.
But you're not going to get Afghanistan people to treat women well and to be democratic and to stop their tribalism and to not kill somebody who thinks differently.
Yeah.
You know, these processes
takes long time.
Thank you.
Generations.
But that doesn't mean just because you've got a group of people who are not adapting to the modern world, who are not even willing in many cases to get work, to get off a reserve, to try and make themselves better. I don't know. I'm really disappointed with what we're doing, with what's happened with a lot of indigenous people, because indigenous people used to recognize that the way to have a better life, to live long, and to have a nice car and to have toilets and running water and refrigerators and grocery stores is to merge into a more sophisticated society. And they had that, and they gained that. Nobody said they had to get rid of their language or get rid of their clothing or get rid of if they want to continue to, trap fish with wooden fish hooks or bone fish hooks. Nobody said they couldn't, but they realized very quickly what the Europeans had in the form of technology was better. And now it's these crazy leftists who have tried to, who again, with in some cases good intentions, some cases wicked intentions, they've convinced Native people that the answer to making their lives better is to turn their backs on modern life, on literacy and numeracy and hard work and competition and fairness, and blame everybody else and sit at home and watch TV all day long and drink. And my nephew, by the way, nephew died at 19 from fentanyl that was given to him by an indigenous pusher. So I'm very aware of the problems on native reserves. And I think the first thing you do is you close them down. I think it's an absolute outrage in Canada to have one race or ethnic group living apart from everybody else, and where in many cases there's no economic opportunities, where there's a lot of incest, where there's a lot of sexual abuse from family members, where there's drugs and alcohol, where there's sniffing glue, where there's where there's suicide. If you care about Indigenous people, you give them the same responsibilities, not just the same rights or more rights. And they're giving them more rights than everybody else. You give them the same rights and the same responsibilities. Right now, they get about $40 billion a year just for one race. My race gets nothing. People from Africa get nothing. People from India get nothing, or China, or whoever else is coming in Canada. They get nothing, but the Indigenous get $40 billion a year, plus all the settlements and this, that, and everything else. That doesn't help people.
That doesn't help them at all, right? It doesn't help them grow. It doesn't help them to get challenged. If you need to grow, you need to get challenged, definitely. I'm with you. So you talked about I want to tell you a little bit of Iranian history, like pre-Islam history. Like Iran was the oldest civilization almost 3,000 years ago. Something Iranian, they are so proud of it. And that's something happened pre-Islam. That's something. It's very interesting to read about it.
But I have read about it, and I know that the people in Persia, or whatever you want to call it, 3,000 years ago, were so much more advanced than my ancestors.
That's right. They were so.
But I'm telling you, but a religion came in called Islam, which means submission, which means, and Muslim meaning being submitting. And what it does when you give power, as Lord Acton said so famously, power corrupts, and absolute power tends to corrupt absolutely. If you give power to any group of people, whether it's Christian popes or kings in the Middle Ages, whether it's Muslim caliphs or sultans, the most disgusting things are going to happen. They're going to have thousands of young women, virgins, so they can sleep with whenever they want. They're going to cut off the private parts of their private soldiers so they can never go after their harem.
Yeah.
I mean, the most terrible things happen. And so what we need, as I said at the beginning, and this is my Father speaking through me, you need a world where everybody has basic rights and freedoms. You're not going to get it under Islamic rule. You're not going to get it under woke, progressive,
DEI-based
rule. Pardon me?
Yeah. DEI-based.
Yeah, those people are the most, I just think, inane. I mean, there's just nothing intelligent about any of their ideas. You're not going to get it under someone like Trump. You're not going to get it under Putin. You're not going to get it under any leader who thinks that the vision for society is to create empires with people at the top have all the power and wealth and responsibility and influence. It doesn't happen that way. The one thing, if there's anything about me that matters, it's just I'm a Democrat. I'm a Democrat. The Greek ruled, meaning a country ruled by the people. When I raised a family with my kids, I tried to make a family that worked just as, and to today, that works for me and my wife, for my 3 children, for my in-laws, for my 6 grandchildren, like my parents, nobody wants to make a family or a society, any reasonable person, that is terrible for some. Wherein, like in Iran, where some people get, hanged by cranes because they spoke out against the government, and others, get to walk around and sit on gold toilets. I mean, it's just, I think most of us fundamentally, whether we're Muslim or Christian or atheist or whatever, I think deep down, most of us are good people who care about rights. And one right that matters to me is the right to speak the truth. And I'm not, of course, one has the right to speak one's conscience, whatever one's truth is. But in my particular case, and in Canada as a school teacher, you're not even allowed to speak the truth. You can't say to girls or little boys, you're in the right body. You're not actually born in the wrong body. Yeah. If I were to say something like that, they'd remove me. And no teacher ever murders his or her students. So when they said that there were 215 kids murdered in one school in Kamloops, one school, all these kids murdered and buried, thrown into a mass grave at night by 6-year-old classmates. Anyone who hasn't had 10 beers and a lot of drugs, anyone without those impediments should realize that that's not true. And yet all of Canada and much of the Western world believe that.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's right. I agree. Like, if I'm very pro capitalism, I believe that people's ability, people's merit should be determined, should be the most important factor for a person to grow. And if you give some people extra attention or extra benefit, so it's not justice. First of all, I think the people who are given a lot of benefits, they are actually the victim, because they are stopping their growth. They stay where they are because it's the nature, human's nature. As long as you don't get challenged, if there is no need, you are not going to grow. You are not going to get a better person tomorrow if they just come to your house and just give you something. So that's why I'm very capital. I think this is the system that people flourish. People become better person uh, uh, as the person they are today. So I'm with you. So Jim, talk about 1BC party. Like, how did they join this party? I know it's a very controversial party, and just tell me about the British Columbia political climate right now. What's going on?
Sure. If I could just make one quick remark about capitalism.
Yeah, of course.
Capitalism is a big word. And really what it means is where people are free to buy and sell, to offer. So I can go out there as a teacher and I can offer my services to this school or that university or whatever. And they can decide, whether to take my services or not. And then they can obviously try and sell their school or university to parents. I mean, without that competition and that freedom, we're not really going to, as you say so beautifully, we're not going to allow humans to flourish. So again, I'm a rights and freedoms guy. I mean, what's the alternative? Communism? Communism right away is saying there's no private property and there's no choice. And we at the top are going to decide everything for you, where you're going to work and how much money you make and everything else. And then, of course, we at the top aren't even going to work. We're just going to exploit you. So anyhow, there's no alternative to a free market system that is free. So 1BC, what happened in British Columbia, more than anywhere else, is there aren't as many treaties with Indigenous people. So they've really exploited that. And we have an absolutely, I don't know how to describe him outside of a man who is completely full of delirious. He's I don't know what's happening in his head, but he is our premier. And he thinks the answer is to give back British Columbia. I don't know why. It's not going to help Indigenous people. It's not going to help non-Indigenous people. He just thinks he's going to all of a sudden make himself look great in history by saying, you people had British Columbia today, and now we're going to give it to 2% of the population that don't work in many cases and don't pay any taxes and don't have the knowledge or the technology to run the place. And anyhow, so he gives away huge swaths of land, the Queen Charlotte Islands, some called Haida Gwaii, part of our Sunshine Coast. Kamloops is coming up next, big part of Richmond. And he's just saying that, we don't have private property anymore because really it's all should go to the Indigenous people who again will sell to the Chinese, and then the Chinese are going to sell to somebody else. And, all of a sudden you're going to have, who knows what, you're going to have, maybe you're going to have some third world dictator, owning Vancouver Island and running it very differently. So that's British Columbia. We have this problem right now where, and of course the government, what they do is they pass these stupid laws, and then they have the judges who are only hired if they're, if they are completely off the charts crazy, and leftists. I mean, who are going, oh my gosh, I'm terrible. Look at me. I'm white. I'm a male, or I'm privileged. I'm whatever. And all of a sudden we got to just give it away to people who don't deserve it anyhow. So that's what's British Columbia. It's a very serious thing. So in all that, you have a political party, and it's the first in Canada, that sang under a leader named Dallas Brody, who went to Princeton and educated as a lawyer at the University of Toronto. And
fifth generation.
And she's a long-term, and her father was very successful businessman and running gas stations around the province. And she said, and with incredible bravery, she said, we're going to change everything. We're not going to play with things. We're not going to change this law or amend that law or whatever. No, we're going to change it all. British Columbia is open to business. Everybody has the same rights. There's nothing special about any one group. There's no preferential hiring. There's no preferential treatment as to who gets to do this or that. we're calling ourselves One BC because we're all one. All British Columbians, all Canadians have the same rights, the same aspirations, the same opportunities. And we're going to change our constitution, and we're going to change our charter. We're going to change absolutely everything that gets in the way. And people are going, well, no, you can't do that. The judge just said this, and the Constitution says that, and this institutional leader and the prime minister says that. And she goes, well, we're going to change it. We're going to not do anything radical. We're simply going to make Canada be what it was 20, 25 years ago. Like, you don't have to go anywhere to find out what a good Canada looks like, because we had it. We didn't have this. And it's only a very recent thing. It's since the Constitution, which I said my father was part of, but they didn't realize, and it was a last minute inclusion, they didn't realize the damage they were going to do with Section 15 and Section 35, where you have affirmative action and special rights for and dispensation for minority groups, and then of course special things for Indigenous people. They didn't realize that. So what you do, if you have any sense, is you correct the errors of the past, and you go and you change that legislation. And any judge who wants to interpret the law in such a way that gives one group of citizens rights over another group of citizens, you say to that judge, thank you for your services. We're going to replace you now. And so it's very refreshing to see a political party, the only one in Canada, that's at all honest about the problems. The problem is this progressive, woke idea of putting people in different categories and giving them rights and so forth. So if you could just hold that picture on the screen for a bit, Asim.
The last one?
This guy here, the picture you just had, the guy here, his name is Philip Stewart. And I think I've got that name right. And he's been in charge of all the Native bands in British Columbia for, I think it's 27 years. He's been in power much longer than Putin. And he met his wife, who's also Native. And when they were involved in the Black Panthers and lots of terrorist organizations, people who preach violence in the 60s and 70s. And the two of them really have a monopoly on power in British Columbia of this Indigenous Native lobby. And they found a guy, that tall guy in the middle, to be their shill, to be their puppet. And he's the guy that he's going, this is great. I'm going to be in the history books as the guy that went back in time. We're going to create Canada like it was before Columbus came. We're going to give it all to the Indigenous people. And they're telling us every day in school and universities, we live on stolen lands. So I guess all of us are going to have to go back to where we came from. And they're going to live here as they lived before, meaning that every night they're going to go to sleep wondering if they're going to have their hair cut right off or their head cut off or taken as a slave, because the Native populations had about 20 or 25% of their population were captured slaves, many of them children. They would have no food. They'd be living in the ground. A lot of the natives that lived in this area lived in what they called, homes, like troglodyte homes. That they called them pit houses, where you dug a hole in the ground and then you put a cover over the top. It's like how the hobbits lived in Lord of the Rings. I mean, you can't go back in time and live better. And so those three people are very dangerous. And yet, of course, they're being showered with praise and power and influence. So if you want to change British Columbia, Canada, or the Western world, you have to realize that the people who are the problem aren't the people that are the 85, 90% who are going about their day. It's the people who are running our institutions. Those are the ones you want to get to. So just one quick example here. So if I say to parents, as I did starting about 10 years ago, I said, okay, do you know in our school or in another school, because I go around, because I was a troublemaker before I got fired, because I'm here for the kids. My guiding principle is the best interest of children. That's, again, no one's going to interfere with my commitment to students, to young people. And so I go around. So nobody in my administration, nobody in the school board, nobody in government would listen to me. And I said, look, what you're doing is you're bringing drag queens into schools who get physically and sexually aroused by putting little children on their laps. And they're pretending they're reading stories, but they're getting aroused. They were doing that in schools right up until, in the Surrey School District, for example, right up until the spring of 2023. And so I'd be saying to people, this is wrong. And what the people would say to me right away, the parents would go, oh my gosh, this is horrible. This is sick. I'm going to go talk to the principal. I'm going to go talk to the superintendent. I'm going to go talk to the premier. I'm going to talk to my member of parliament. And I go, oh my gosh. Those are the people who are doing it. Those are the people who are benefiting from it. Because what they're doing is they're saying, by bringing these drag queens or trans or homosexuals or anybody who is, they're presenting themselves as these virtue signaling heroes. Look at me. I've made life better for this persecuted minority. And you go, well, yeah, you've helped men who are pedophiles. You've helped them maybe, but you have exploited every single child that sat on their laps in kindergarten class. Like, I mean, it's just, so this is the instinct in our society. Crazy. Oh, I'm going to talk to the principal. I'm talking to the superintendent. I'm going to talk to the member of parliament. I'm going to talk to the premier, the prime minister. And they're going, people don't get it. You're not going to make changes by going to the people at the top. You have to bring them down. And that's what I'm doing. And I'm doing it with Francis Whittleson, for example. I'm walking on university campuses and walking into schools, and I'm just simply saying, you're being lied to about all these different things. And they call the police. I've had the police call to me twice last week. And the police come and they say, we got to be back a distance and all that kind of stuff. But the reality is, I'm talking to people and I'm saying, as Orwell said, hope lies in the proles and the ordinary people. I'm saying you're not going to change any of this. You're not going to get good literature back. You're not going to get kids understanding history as it was. You're not going to get academic standards again. You're not going to get kids judged on who they are as opposed to their skin color, their sexuality, or their religion. You're not going to get the good things back in schools unless you go into the principal's office, superintendent's office, and say, look, Mr. or Mrs., this is ending. It's over now. And I did that in 2023. I went around to a lot of schools in Surrey and I talked to the parents, and it just ended because the parents walked in and just said, done. I ever hear of a drag queen at the school again, you're not going to have your job another minute. In other words, you need to stand up. And that's what happens in Iran. The only way you're going to change Iran is you're not going to get people at the top are going to come in and change it and all of a sudden make it a beautiful democracy. You have to get enough people in the street who are going to look around and say, actually, we're stronger.
Jim, they are the bravest people. They are the bravest people. You have no idea how many people are being killed, executed, tortured. Like, I'm so proud of Iranian people inside Iran, and they're paying a lot of prices and they're speaking up. But the regime is brutal. It's brutal.
But look, I don't have this solution for Iran right now. All I can say to you is that the people of Iran have long been the most heroic people in my life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, wow. And I read Marjane Satrapi, for example, who wrote Persepolis, and I taught
She's not the right person, though. She's a communist. But okay, I'll introduce you some.
She was critical. She was critical of this tyranny. My point is, is I can't say of an answer, but you will know one day
Yes.
there'll be enough
Water finds
Iranians
the
in the
ocean.
street,
Definitely.
and they're going to completely seize it back.
Yeah.
But I do know that in Canada, the people who go into the principal's office or go to the school board, who go to the legislature, they're not going to be shot. They're not going to be, hanged the next day or month. That's so look, I again, I'm a teacher. I have no business telling you, the Iranian people should do, but I'm with you. But I can tell you in Canada that people do have the strength to change all this in a hurry. And if Canadians, and this is one thing I haven't said, if Canadians, a generation or 3 or 5 or 10, who are educating these children, these native children in these schools, if they did not murder them or torture them or abuse them, how dare we bear false witness? How dare we allow that defamation of dead Canadians? And 4 of those teachers, 2 were my great uncles and 2 are my great great grandfathers. How dare anybody say that members of my family, I met my 2 great uncles who were missionaries. How dare anybody say that these people were guilty of evil without knowing anything about them? And their life was devoted to helping not just Indigenous people, but one great uncle, for example, or my one great great grandfather, he worked with people from India who came to Canada, who didn't speak the language, who didn't have a place of worship. My point is, don't paint all early Canadians as monsters, particularly if you're ignorant and have no idea. Not you, you're very smart, but I'm just speaking figuratively here. Don't you dare do that in front of me ever, because you're going to get a mouthful. Telling me that Canadians who built one of the world's best democracies should be called horrible, racist, genocidal people.
Monsters. Yeah, of course. Absolutely. No, I'm with you. But the problem is, what I don't like about TikTok and Instagram? They're all these short video generations. It's just all these short videos dumbing people down. So it doesn't help the younger generation to go deeper, analyze it. And critical thinking is fading away because of all these. That's why I hate Instagram, to be honest with you. I hate Instagram and TikTok. They're just not, they're propaganda machines, and they just look at the surface of every topic, and they won't go deep and just they take layer by layer and say, okay, this is a propaganda. This is the truth. So it takes some time. It takes some studies, do some homework to understand what actually happened. And I'm with you. But unfortunately, propaganda works. You want to see a proof? Look at this picture. So look at this. Unbelievable. It's kind of worrying. But now I think Canadians are waking up. They just woke up all of a sudden and they realize they may not have ownership of their own properties anymore. So they are kind of scared right now. And 1BC is getting a lot of attention from Canadians. But my question is from you is, and my last questions, what differentiates 1BC from Conservative Party?
Well, I think the problem with any party in Canada over the last 20, 30 years, maybe more, this movement really came about in the 60s, 70s. It became known over time. Political correctness has different names used, DEI, wokeism, progressive. There's all sorts of different names. But really what it is, it's a radical left reinventing or reigniting communism. Like it's the same principles. There's nothing good in it. It's going to result in violence. So I would say the Conservative Party lost its way. I think the Liberal Party lost its way. I mean, all political parties, no political party when I was younger believed that Canada that people should lose their private property rights based on race and who was here. And you have a beautiful picture, man, you're smart. You had a picture of a Sioux guy. The Sioux came over in 1876, and now they have a number of reserves. I think there's 11 of them, 11 different reserves in Canada, and they're called First Nations. My people, I'm part Viking. My people came over 1,000 years ago, and there's physical proof of that in Newfoundland. And obviously, in Iceland and Greenland and so forth. You have the Iroquois came over, at the end of the War of Independence, in the U.S. In the 1780s. It's just absolutely unbelievable. They're calling people who are First Nation people who weren't even first here. And then, of course, after time, they kept taking land from each other
That's
rewarding them for their bad records. They have no idea how long any has been anywhere. But just coming back to the Conservative Party.
Yeah.
So when I was a teacher and I, was fighting against, again, the gender stuff, the race stuff, the Indigenous stuff, getting rid of math and essays and tests and exams and student behavior, and the teacher all of a sudden got in trouble all the time, and, getting rid of literature and changing history, and I could go on. But all these things are happening. I kept saying to people who are in the Conservative Party, what are you doing? They're destroying all the statues of Dundas and
conservative values. Yeah.
What are you doing? That they're going to little children and they're saying to them, bind your chests, girls. Take puberty blockers. They were saying this to kids. They're going, where are you going? My 3-year-old grandson in daycare was coming home crying one day. He said, am I going to be taken away and have my hair cut off and never see my family again? I'm saying, where are you? Where's your sense? This isn't true. You shouldn't ever sexualize children. You shouldn't have teachers in every school in Canada on the first day going, well, Johnny, you're 5, tell me what your pronoun is, because I need to know what your sexuality is. So what happened is the Conservative Party, federally, provincially, all levels, all politicians in Canada, they became cowards. They became absolute weaklings because they wanted to get into power so much, and they're afraid of this woke media mob.
That's why I do not believe in democracy. Democracy has a lifespan.
Well, I won't go there deeply with you because we might not have time, but I will say this. I believe in you because the media in Canada made the Conservative Party and sensible people afraid that they were going to be canceled like me. So they moved left and they became afraid and they hid their faces and they hid under their desk. So they didn't have to talk about these issues. So where 1BC is different is there's 2 women there. And then they brought in candidates like me, and there's nobody who's going to silence me. I'm telling you that. And I think I've got half the strength of Tara Armstrong and Dallas Brody, the leaders of 1BC. They are not going to be deterred about anything. And when they said the leaders of this Indigenous mafia in Canada, they're going, we want them to resign. Dallas Brody's response was, you know what? I'd like you to resign.
That's right.
Yeah, you resign. Yeah. You're the one that's ruining our country. In other words, people are going, well, you can't speak that way to an Indigenous man yes, you can. They are Canadians like every other Canadian. If they have bad ideas, if they're lying, they need to be called out. And that's what I'm doing. I'm asking conservative people, all Canadians, to use what you talked about, to use critical thinking, but maybe more importantly, to find a little bit of strength and courage and do what the Cowardly Lion eventually did in The Wizard of Oz. And that is develop the courage of one's convictions.
I would say dignity.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I would say dignity. So, Jim, I want to a little bit dig deeper on democracy. My priority, if you ask me, first three priority is freedom, freedom, freedom. Because if you sacrifice freedom at any cost, democracy will be gone, and that's what's happening in Canada. Like every institution, every political party is being manipulated, and let's just face it, because freedom is slowly is going away in Canada through like Bill C2, C8, C9, all these horrible bills. So somehow our democracy, I think there should be some sort of revisit to our constitution in future, the Canadian Constitution, and then look at all these clauses. And first of all, everybody is equal. You made a very great point. Like they're like looking at ethnicity, minorities, giving away something big because you are like part of like different group of people is not. It's never been like, like throughout the history. You've never seen a good result ever in any country, and that's extremely important. But
Yeah,
do you
yes.
have any?
So I would say what people don't realize in democracy is you can't just have the right to vote for who's going to represent you for the next 5 years.
Yeah,
You can't have 1 minute every 5 years of democracy.
yeah,
It only works if everybody participates in that democracy. Because I said earlier, power corrupts.
yeah,
And you need to hold those politicians' feet to the fire every single day. And whether it's the principal of the school, whether it's the head of the law society, whether it's the top judge, whoever these people are that end up in positions of greater responsibility, you need to watch them every single day.
yeah.
And the moment they go away from their mandate, which is to represent the people, they should be gone. So it can work. It can work. And I just think again, and end on this note for me, is it's the Canada that we knew is coming back.
Yeah.
Because I think people recognize what's happening, that we can no longer trust our politicians, that our leaders. It doesn't matter whether it's, doctors during COVID, or health authorities, whether it's our politicians during the trucker convoy who presented, truckers and ordinary Canadians as insurrectionists and racists. We can't trust them. Our ruling elite is completely discredited. So we need to get people in power who are going to be people who representatives of the people. I think that can be done. We're never going to have a perfect democracy. But when I was growing up, we had there used to be prime ministers, and I'll use one during the war, William Lyon Mackenzie King, that he would have people during the Second World War write letters to him. And then Robert Borden in the First World War, write letters to these men and say, I lost my son in the war and I don't have much money and I don't know what to do. And the prime minister would write back letters and send money. I mean, there was a time in Canada where our leaders were really noble men and women.
Yeah.
That can happen again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you very much, Jim. Thanks for your time. It was great speaking with you. I'm rooting for 1BC big time. I'm rooting for 1BC. Her bravery is just crazy. She has all my respect. And everybody in 1BC party. Best of luck to you guys. Best of luck to you guys. BC really needs some change, some change, big time. We can see it, and everybody's thirsty for some big change.
Yeah, and I just would like to say that the most important actors, I think I'm playing a role. Obviously, Dallas Brody and Tara Armstrong to a greater extent, but I think the most important people right now are people like you. It's the people who are outside of mainstream media who are addressing these problems that mainstream media and governments, politicians and others are trying to, to bury. And,
That's right.
and so the power, the change is going to come from the democratic voices of social media people like you. I have influence. You're giving me influence, but without you, ASEM, I'd be nothing. So you're the one that's changing Canada more than I am.
Thank you very much for kind words. Have a great night and enjoy your weekend. Have a great weekend, Jim.
Thanks so much. You take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.